Hello, I'm going to present the work entitled A Deep Learning Architecture for Recognizing Abnormal Activities of Groups Using Context and Motion Information. This talk is going to be divided into an introduction, architecture proposal, experimentation, and some conclusions. To automatically detect human behavior using videos is a topic that has been tackled by the scientific community for very long, but there is still room for improvement, mainly when we are talking about groups. For automatic detection, we need some data that includes the different behaviors of the people. However, most of the cases from CCTV cameras, we have a large number of normal behaviors and only few abnormal ones. This creates a problem when we want to train different machine learning techniques for the detection. Hence, we consider that including other information such as context to the spatial temporal descriptor, which is basically the movement of people, can improve the classification. As if we see here in the diagram, usually we have the people, the sequence of people, then some kind of descriptor of the trajectories or behavior, and a classifier. Now we want to include another input that is the context. So the main objective of this work is to propose a computer vision architecture able to learn and recognize group activities using the movement in the scene, along with context information to provide this extra information to improve the classification. In order to achieve this goal, we first propose a local movement descriptor for the classification of human behavior. We validate the system for one class classification, which means that we only know normal behavior, and then we try to estimate what is abnormal. And finally, we check the results against the state-of-the-art proposals. Our architecture is composed by an input, a representation stage, a classification stage, and finally the output. The input will be a sequence of images where some people are performing behaviors. And as an output, we will have one class, which is going to be normal or abnormal. Initially, we're talking about movement representation stage. And for that, we present here a descriptor called DADV. And this is based on the activity description vector proposed in 2013. It describes the movement in the scene by extracting a representation of those movements. So it allows to train the different networks using a small label dataset. Why a small label dataset? Because it will reduce the space of solutions, because we are inserting a descriptor in the network, not the original data. It considers the apparent movement of individuals, not the specific movements of each, but the apparent movement, as we will see. And the output of this descriptor will be some images in a different way, as we understand by RGBD, that will be plugged into a deep learning network. So we have the input that is a sequence, and we will divide it with a window size in different sets of frames, subsets of frames, from a starting frame to an ending frame. The motion of the people is going to be estimated. In order to do that, we use optical flow, which is based on the assumption of constancy of image brightness. From that optical flow from the whole sequence, or the subsequence from the window size, we accumulate left, right, down, and up movements. So we have 4 images that represent the accumulated displacement of the people in the scene. On the other hand, we want to know the frequency, the amount of time of people in the scene. So in order to do it, we get the foreground, and then we accumulate that foreground along the whole sequence. With those 5 images, left, right, up, down, and frequency, we create 2 results, the RF and the UDF. These two are going to be the images plugged into the deep learning architecture. So the second stage, the classification stage, in this case is going to be focused on one class classification. As we see here on the right, we have different behaviors, but we only know the people walking. We assume that is a normal, and whatever else is abnormal, as bicycle, a skater, or golf car. So, in order to get this architecture, we divide it in two parts. First, top part is the activity recognition module that involves two CNN, one for the image resulting of the left-right frequency addition, and the other one for the up-down frequency. On the other hand, we include the context recognition. This context recognition could be different things, but in this case, we're going to have only one input, which will be the scene. So the actual background or scene where the activity is performed. As we are using one class classification, we create two hyperspheres, one for the activity, one for the context, with a set radius that will include what we consider normal behavior there. Both classifications will be merged using different weights. So the final composed architecture will be as it is shown, which is on the first hand we have the input of sequence and then the descriptor with the DADV representation state, and then the two images LRF and UDF will be plugged into the classifier stage, and also we get some frames and we place them in the classifier stage on the bottom part for the context. To evaluate the proposal, we perform some experiments, and then the window size is going to be 10 and 40, which will be about half second and 2 seconds. Coming from the original ADV, we have to divide the image in two cells, and it will be 224 by 224 cells. The classifier in this case is a ResNet 15, and we performed some data augmentation, and then we did some cross-validation to evaluate the performance. We used two different datasets, well-known datasets with very little amount of data for a deep learning classification. These are traditional datasets, and we will see how with the descriptor and with our architecture is possible to train and to achieve good results. For the loss function, we perform first the minimum coverage circle problem, and second one, another way to calculate this hyperplane to divide the normal and abnormal cases using another neural network. Since the ResNet is not meant to classify LRF and UDF, we need to train them in different steps. First, the last layer for transfer learning. Second, the initial layers for domain adaptation. And finally, the middle and last layer. For the fourth, for the context, we are going to use YOLO in this case. Well, we have some results here and highlighted the best achieved, which is the DADV plus the context. It happens for both loss functions, and the values are quite acceptable for being compared to the state of the art. For the other one, for the second result, it happens similarly with higher achievement. On average, we see that the best results are achieved combining the DADV descriptor plus the context for both loss functions, HVDD and neural network. If we compare to the state of the art, considering that most of the cases state of the art, they focus on one specific kind of behavior, and we are not performing this kind of operation. We have a general architecture that from one hand is like some sequences, and they are described, and then they are classified independently. On average, our proposal performed better than most of them. So finally, A deep learning architecture based on an analysis of local movement has been provided, which allows the classification of group activities independently of the number of people and the activity. An activity descriptor, the ADV, has been specified to be used in deep learning proposals. As a classification with three flows is proposed to facilitate and enhance the learning activities, and the proposed architecture has been urged to address one-class classification. For future lines, we propose to use other kind of CNN-based classifier, not only ResNet, and to explore the feasibility of this architecture to represent and analyze abnormal behavior moving from a multi-class classification instead of only one class problem.